Marcus here, and welcome to Talk Sober, the YouTube channel where we talk about addiction. And today's special training is just me. Terry's not here today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you all about self-hypnosis for alcohol addiction. What is it? How it works? And is it something that you can use to stop your addiction, stop your cravings, everything like that? So we're going to dive in. We got a lot to cover. Let me pull up my questions here so that we can get your guys' questions as you guys hop on. And what we're going to do over the next 60 minutes or so is I'm going to teach you how the mind works. I'm going to teach you how hypnosis works, how NLP works, and what those have to do with alcohol addiction, if anything. And we're going to kind of go through this over the next hour or so. And I'm going to be talking to your conscious mind as well as your subconscious mind. So let's talk about how this works. And I think if you understand how your brain works, everything will start to make sense and you'll start to understand why you have those cravings, why you have those thoughts, why things never seem to be working the way you want, or why recovery is difficult for you. So here we have our guy that is hypnotized on his computer. And a lot of people that might be watching this video have been looking for something where they could just watch a video, get hypnotized, wake up tomorrow, and poof, you're not an alcoholic anymore. Now, while I wish it did work that way, it often doesn't. And in my early years before I got sober, I had been trying various different things. As you guys see behind me, there's lots of books about NLP, addiction, hypnosis, how the brain works, and everything like that. And while I had all these tools, while all these things were in my mind and I understood them, they didn't actually take effect until I actually got sober and then understood what went on. And what you're going to find out here is that NLP is the study of what works. Hypnosis is talking to unconscious mind. So what we have here is we have a guy that's hypnotized. Now, a lot of people look at hypnotism and they look at stuff like that. And by the way, I'm not a hypnotist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not trained in anything. This is all just stuff that I've learned over the last couple of years, actually 5.5 years of being sober. But the way hypnosis is, a lot of people look at it like a stage show. You know, you hypnotize someone, they cluck like a chicken and everything like that. And that's not really what's going on. So I want to kind of describe what hypnosis looks like for you. Okay, what does it look like for you? Well, I want to ask you a question. I want you guys to answer it in the chat box so that I know where you guys are at, right? How many of you guys have ever driven home or you've driven somewhere and then you arrived at the place that you were driving to and you forgot how you got there? You don't remember the stoplights, the people who cut you off. You don't remember anything, really. All you remember is, hey, I was at this other place. Now I'm home. And everything in between has been deleted. I don't know what's going on. I couldn't tell you anything about it because I was in a trance. All right, a trance and hypnotism is pretty much the same thing, only hypnotism is deliberately trying to put you in a trance. Same kind of thing happens when you watch TV, right? There's studies that show that when you watch TV, the flicker rate of the TV slows down your breathing, slows down your mental capacity, and it's almost as if that TV is talking directly to your subconscious mind. Now, where did all this stuff come from, and how's this going to help you with alcoholism? Well, this all came from, it actually got popularized by Dr. Freud back in, I think it was the 1800s or something like that. And Dr. Freud was out there and he's like, we need to speak to people's subconscious desires. And his idea was that we had all of these desires that were laying below our consciousness, driving our behavior. All right, the idea of self-hypnosis, the idea of addiction, the idea of NLP and everything like that is to change behavior. Now, when it comes to drinking, obviously you want to change the drinking behavior so that we could look at that and be like, okay, what's going on with this behavior? How can we change it? How can I not drink anymore? How can I live a life that is free of alcoholism? Now, what Dr. Freud says is he said there was like a lot of different subconscious desires. You have the desire for sex, desire for food, desire to be liked, the ego, and all these other things. All right, and the idea here was, hey, wait a minute. I wonder if there's a way that we could deliberately hypnotize people to maybe change their behavior, right? Maybe there's a magic button that we can use to change people's behavior, change what they do, change how they think, change what their desires are. And I want you to realize that no matter what, even while you're watching this, you are in some kind of a trance. You're always in some kind of a trance. You're always fixated on a certain thing. Now, it might not be a deep trance. It might be something like, hey, I'm watching a webinar or watching a training, or maybe I'm at work and I'm doing stuff, or maybe I'm giving a talk and I forget what I'm even talking about because it's automatic. Okay? A lot of these things are akin to being in a trance. Now, when you're in a trance, there's several different things going on. One, you have the part of the brain, which is like the prefrontal cortex and all that stuff, where all your decisions reside while you're, your flight or fight, your instant thought processes. These are the conscious things that are brought into awareness. And when I use the word consciousness, we're going to pass that out as the word awareness, okay? What you're aware of. Now, behind the scenes, right up here, this guy's got his conscious mind, and it's like, hey, I think this hypnotism shit's a bunch of shit, and I don't think it's going to work for me, or whatever it is that his conscious mind is telling him. Now, behind the scenes, you have your subconscious mind. Now, your subconscious mind is made up of a bunch of memories, your beliefs, your ideas about life, your worldview, and all this other stuff, okay? So we look at that and we're like, okay, well, what does this have to do with alcoholism? Marcus, what does it have to do with anything? Well, have you ever gone in when you were active in your alcohol addiction, as I have, where you literally see yourself buying alcohol? You didn't want to buy alcohol. You didn't want to drink alcohol, but you see yourself doing it. And it's almost like you're like this guy here, and you are automatically being thrown into the den of alcoholism, and you're automatically succumbing to whatever the alcoholism says to do. Well, the reason that happens is because it is embedded deep in your subconscious mind. While you might not be thinking about alcohol, and this is why alcoholism, though it is a thinking disorder, you can't outthink it, right? There's no way of thought that's going to outthink alcoholism or outsmart it. You have to focus on what you do, because what you do will change your subconscious mind and will change the way you think about everything. Is everyone following so far? Type follow in the box if you're following along and you're getting all this, because I want you to understand the difference between these things, and I want you to understand why it seems like it's almost automatic for you to reach for alcohol, in the same way that it might be automatic for you to fight back when someone's mean to you, or getting in a shouting match with someone, or whether it's to retreat, right? Whatever this is, these are your automatic processes that are going on. Now, the idea here is that maybe hypnotism can start to change some of those things, and maybe it can. For some people it can, for some people it can't. But we want to look at it and say, well, how is that going to work for you? Now, when you're in a state of hypnosis, what that does is it bypasses your conscious mind. So instead of talking to this guy here and saying, here's a list of things of why you should and shouldn't drink, what we're doing is we're shutting this off for a little bit, and we are bypassing it and just going to your subconscious mind and trying to change the things in the subconscious mind. Now, in order to look at that, we have to understand how the stuff got there in the first place. Because here's the deal. You didn't just wake up one day with all these subconscious ideas saying, this is how I'm going to live life. Okay, now maybe some of it's DNA, maybe some of it's the alcohol gene, or whatever people think it is, which is all debatable, by the way. But let's talk about what it is so that we understand how to deal with it. How did this stuff get here in the first place? Well, let's take a look at what is known as NLP. Now, NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. It was started by John Grinder and Richard Bandler. And they came up with this idea that was much like a computer, okay? This is all going to make sense to you, and hopefully this will help you to stop drinking, and hopefully this hour-long video is going to help you understand exactly what's going on in your mind. Now, John and Richard came up with this idea. They were computer geeks in San Francisco. They loved computers, and they kind of found a parallel between how a computer works and how the brain works, okay? So follow with me here. First of all, you have your processor, right? Your processor is the thing that everything runs through, and it processes stuff. Like right now, we are running this. There's a camera that's going to the processor that puts it in the little box there where I'm at. There's a screen program that is looking at the screen with all these images, and all those are going into the processor, and it's processing the image for you to see. That is the reason that you guys can see me. That's the reason all this is like looking hopefully pretty good for you guys, right? That's the processor. Now, in addition to the processor, we also have what's known as a hard drive. All right, the hard drive is the one that Bill Gates is really popular for making a big thing. His MS-DOS program was a program that was like, hey, now we can read the hard drive. Instead of having these little disks that we have to put in the computer, now we have it all on the hard drive, and it can read everything all at once instead of having to have a bunch of disks. Okay, so that's like the big, huge memory, or the brain, as it were. Okay? And then we have what's known as random access memory, or RAM. Okay, so if your computer's slow, it's probably because you don't have enough RAM or your processor's slow. Okay, now the way this works is the processor's here and it's trying to do the best job of computing, right? It's trying to do the best thing possible. Now the processor has to go here and it's got to find stuff. Like it's got to go through, and this image here, if I click on this image and hit properties or something like that, it's going to find out where this image is at in the computer. Hopefully we can close this. Let's see. Can we close that? I think so. I don't know. We'll try to close it, right? But the processor's there, and the processor's like, okay, well, you know, we need to understand this stuff. We need to find this file. We need to find where this stuff is at. There we go. I can delete the properties. There we go. And it's going to find the image. So it's going to search on the hard drive. Now, in order to search the hard drive, because there's a lot of stuff on the hard drive, it's going to take a while, right? It's got to go through, and it's got to be like, well, Marcus has a lot of files on his hard drive. I got to find that image. I got to check this out. Okay, so it goes and it goes and it works and it works and tries to find the image, and then it finally finds the image, but it takes a while. Now, what the random access memory does is it takes certain things from the hard drive that are used often, right? These are like the important, crucial things. All right, it's like, okay, well, Marcus uses this picture a lot. Marcus uses the video a lot. Marcus uses this a lot. All right, and it's going to store them in the random access memory so it can be pulled up really quick. So instead of looking at the big hard drive that's like 5 terabytes big, it goes to the memory and it looks at like a gig or 128 gigs or whatever it is, right? So it's a smaller area of really, really important stuff that's crucial to the working of what I use on my computer. Now, all of this stuff that I have open is all on random access memory, okay? Bear with me, this is all going to make sense in a minute. You're going to be like, I get how my brain works, right? And if you get how your brain works, we can reverse engineer it. We can look at people who have been sober, look at people who have the life that we want, and say, how can we get that? Which is the idea of what NLP is in the first place, which is a study of what works. We're looking at what works, who has the result that we want. As they say in recovery, if I go find someone who's been sober a long time, and I want what he has, I could ask him what he does, because behavior is what drives the result that he gets. Okay, so changing behavior, we got to look at that. So what happens here is the random access memory is looking at the things that are very, very important. And it's like, okay, well, we're gonna use this, and we're just gonna store all the important shit here so that the processor can find it really quick. Now, here's how it works in your mind. In your mind, you have your memories, right? You have your memories. I was, teased as a kid. I was beat by a parent. I was had this traumatic event. Maybe I went in a war. Maybe these things happened. Okay, those are all in your hard drive. Now, what your brain does, which is your CPU, your processor, your brain goes in and it's like, well, there's certain things that are really important that are detrimental to my ego survival. It's detrimental to me surviving as a person. So we go through and it's like, okay, well, I think we need like that time the bomb went off in Desert Storm. Maybe you're a veteran of Desert Storm. If you are, thank you for your service. And you have that bomb that went off and that memory's there. And so it's kind of always in the forefront of your mind, but not really, right? You're not thinking about it all the time. But if a balloon pops near you, you're like, holy shit, I'm back there. I need to run. A bomb's going off. Or perhaps, maybe like me, you had a parent or step-parent that was unkind and abusive. And so what happens is every time you see someone or hear something that's similar to what that parent did, boom, it triggers it. Now, because this stuff is important in your brain and it's saying these things are necessary for survival, they're recalled involuntary. This is what we call involuntary recall. These are things that are recalled involuntary. You don't try to do it. You're not sitting there in class and a balloon pops and you're not thinking about, hey, I wonder if a war is going to go off. You're just sitting there thinking, I wonder what the teacher's going to talk. Boom. Now I'm in this state of panic and I get sweaty and I get afraid because that random access memory was triggered. Okay? Type triggered if you guys are with me so far. All right, and this is kind of how it works. So let's take a look at this and let's focus. And we're going to keep this here because I want you to realize that a lot of stuff is in your random access memory, and that is something that you have to deal with. Now, how does this stuff get here in the first place? Because you didn't go to through life. You didn't go through your childhood saying, hey, I'm going to find these things and I'm going to use these because this is what we should be afraid of, right? You're only born, as Richard Bandler usually says, one of the founders of NLP, he says you're only born with two fears, the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling, right? That's it. That's all you're born with. You're not born with the thought or the feeling of being afraid of public speaking. You're not born with that. It doesn't matter. You don't care. Like as a baby, they could put you on stage in front of 9 million people, and if you need your diaper changed, you're going to yell in front of 9 million people. That's just the way it is. So how does this stuff happen? And we're going to go through some ideas, go through some things that are going to share with you how the brain works and everything like that, okay? So first of all, throughout life, what we do is we go through life developing beliefs. All right, beliefs could be something like maybe the pastor said something and he's like, hey, you know what? If you do this, you're going to go to hell. And that's a belief. Or maybe he says, you need to do unto others like you should do to yourself. Or you shouldn't be a mean person or a bad person. Or maybe you grew up and you thought, hey, maybe I do need to be a mean person because I need to protect myself. Okay, these are all the beliefs that are based on the stories that we tell ourselves. We tell ourselves the world is against us. We tell ourselves, I could never get ahead. Oh, woe is me, I'm an alcoholic. Poor me, I need to deal with something. Or I'm an alcoholic because, or whatever it is. And you have all these beliefs in your mind. Now, what's happening here is ever since the time you were a kid, your brain is filtering and distorting and deleting and giving meaning to everything that happens in your life. So let's go ahead and let's put the old filter on this guy's brain. Okay, so here's the filter on this guy's brain. Now, what happens is this filter is made up of things that happen before you were of age, before you even thought of it. Even now, like I'm 40 and I'm realizing that a lot of the things that I believed were based on distortions that I made, different things like that. Okay, so what happens is you have certain things in your life, and maybe in your life you like see some people. You're like, here's our people. And, this guy's happy, this guy's sad, this guy feels whatever, you're right? And you have these people, and what happens is before this stuff reaches your brain, right, in a split second, what happens is you are judging things. You're constantly giving meaning, okay? You're giving meaning, you're constantly deleting, you're constantly distorting, and you're constantly generalizing what comes in through your senses. And I think I have the senses here. There they are. There's our senses, right? And we have our senses here. And what's happening is you're deleting and distorting all the stuff that comes in through your senses. Now, much like a computer, the senses would be like the keyboard, the mouse, the camera, anything that provides input into the computer. So we got to look at that and be like, okay, this stuff's providing input. Now, what's happening is it's going through the processor and it's saying, this guy is mad, therefore, I'm going to give that meaning saying, stay away from that guy, he's a dick, or whatever, right? Or my spouse treats me this way, I'm going to give that meaning that says I'm worthless. And what happens is in our beliefs, we also have our ongoing narrative. Our ongoing narrative is the narrative that says what happens, why it happens, and what it means, right? Our ongoing narrative could be something behind the scenes that says, life never works out for me, or my wife doesn't really love me, or my husband would rather have someone else, or whatever it is, right? And these certain narratives go through life with us, and they affect everything that comes in our filter. Now, as Roger Korzybski, something like that. Don't remember his first name, but I know it started with an R. Right? So what he said was the map is not the territory. And what that means is that your internal map of what's going on in the world isn't really what's going on in the world. Me going out and looking at a tree and giving a tree a hug isn't really experiencing a tree. That's me naming it and saying that's a tree. And there's people who have said in life that the minute you learn language is the minute you stop experiencing life in the real way, because the minute I tell a toddler what a car is, poof, there goes the magic. Now it's just a car. There's cars everywhere. Everyone has cars. Cars don't matter. They're just a thing. But to a little boy who doesn't know it's a car, he's like, wow, what are these magical things floating around on wheels that make loud noises that are really cool, right? And the minute you describe it, the minute you put that through your filter, it starts to change everything. So our mind is constantly giving meaning, distorting, deleting, and generalizing all the things that come in through our sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. And it's extremely powerful. Now, the reason this is powerful, and I'll give you a little story. All right, the reason this is powerful is because of the sub sandwich. When I was in, I think it was high school, we used to go off campus for lunch. And we'd go off campus and we'd go to like Subway or Pizza Hut or something like that, because as a teenager, you like to eat junk food, and that's what we liked. And at the time, I didn't have much money, and they had a sale on the meatball sub, right? And they were like, oh, you could get a meatball sub for $1.99. And I was like, I got $1.99. I'm going to get that meatball sub. Now, at the time that I had that meatball sub, I also had a nasty flu that I didn't know was in my body yet. I had a flu, and it was terrible. So I ate the sandwich, I went home, and I had flu-like symptoms from my own flu that was going on that wasn't even related to the sandwich, right? And I ate this sandwich, I had the flu, I felt like crap for a day or 2 days or whatever it was, and then, still, to this day, I have not eaten a meatball sub from that place ever again. Why is that? Why is that? I'm sure I'm fine. The illness had nothing to do with it. So what happened here? Why can I not do that? Well, what happened was the evil meatball. The evil meatball here wasn't actually evil, but, you know, hey, we got to make this fun, right? The evil meatball set off an anchor in my brain. And it said, this equals sick. And so every time I thought about that sandwich, or anything related to the sandwich, see it on TV, anywhere, I would instantly start to feel nauseous, even though I wasn't sick, even though I didn't have the sandwich, even though the sandwich didn't even make me sick. And what this is known as is an anchor. Now, when people have traumatic experiences or experiences that get embedded into their random access memory, what happens is it puts a little anchor, and it says, this is important, therefore we need to make this certain thing happen in your body, right? It's a physiological, chemical response to what's going on. And these anchors happen in our brain everywhere. For me, I have anchors of people bullying me. I have anchors of people that were mean to me. I have anchors of, parents. I have anchors of all kinds of things. And you might have these anchors that you don't even know exist. You just sit somewhere and you're like, I don't even know that exists. Like for me, it's very difficult for me to go to church these days, not because I'm not religious anymore, but because of the fact that when I was a kid, there was a big sweaty preacher who was kind of a psychopath, and he just begged for money, and he was crazy. And I was a kid, and this guy yanked me out of the crowd and scared the shit out of me, brought me on stage and started screaming at me and spitting in my face about what God was going to tell me, right? And so now, here I am, 30 years later, and I still have those same triggers because I still have the fear in my subconscious mind. I don't think about it. I'm not sitting there in church thinking, well, that pastor looks a little fat and a little sweaty. I think he's going to come grab little Marcus out of his seat and yell at him on stage. No, it doesn't happen that way. It just produces anxiety in my body because what's happening, as we mentioned here, is that is bypassing the conscious mind. The conscious mind's sitting here trying to make sense of whatever is going on in church. And the subconscious mind is saying, alert, something bad's going to happen. We need to produce anxiety because Marcus needs to be ready to run out of this church as fast as humanly possible because if that sweaty preacher comes down, we got to freak out. And what happens is it produces a behavior and a state in my mind that I seemingly can't overcome. And the state is, I need to run, I need to flee, I need to get the hell out of here. Something bad is going to happen. So what happens is my body says, well, let's produce this cortisol and this anxiety stuff. I think it's cortisol, I think is the right term for it. Again, I didn't go to very much school, but I try, right? And we're like, okay, I got to look at this. So now I have all these things going on in my brain, all these things going on in my body, all because of a trigger that happened 30 years ago that I haven't even thought about in years. What the hell is going on? And maybe you're like me and you're like, well, shit, the only way to get rid of anxiety, I mean, I could think about all these things and I can go to therapy and therapy's good and I could go to hypnotists and hypnotists are good and but nothing seems to be working. And for me, 5.5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I was trying to quit drinking, I didn't know what to do. I thought I was going crazy. I didn't realize that my brain has built these walls and these ideas that I needed to drink myself out of because I didn't understand them and I didn't know what went on. I thought Marcus is an insane person because he gets anxiety everywhere. What the hell's going on? I didn't realize that alcohol produced anxiety. I didn't realize it. I thought, hey, you know what? It seems to calm me. So what's going on here? And what happened was now I had compounded things on top of compounded things, and everything in life. I would go to the church. I would have an image in my brain. I would think about drinking. Oh, there's my drinking guy. There he is. I'd think about drinking, and all these things would start to compile, and I'd give them meaning. I'd distort them. The truth wasn't really the truth. I'd generalize them and say, every time I drink, I feel good. And I forgot about all the times that I drank and I felt like shit and I had OCD and I woke up with a hangover and I didn't know what to do with my life. I forgot about those. Or maybe I forgot that there was nice people in the world because there was bad people. Or maybe I thought a certain thing or felt a different way because of my ongoing narrative and my beliefs that were rooted so deep in my brain that I couldn't get away from them. Now, before we go any further in this and look at some of the definitions and the terms that are going to help us, let's take a look at a quote. And as we go further, type in the box if you find this type of training helpful for you. Type helpful or, not so much. Let me know if this is helpful for you so that we know what to do on the channel and kind of guide you through. And while you're answering that, I want you guys to look at this quote. Because what we're doing today is we're talking a lot about thoughts and words and feelings and things that go on in our mind. And I want you to remember this quote by Alan Watts, one of my favorite quotes, because before I stopped drinking, I was caught in this web where I understood all the stuff that you're seeing today, but it didn't really work for me because I didn't know what was going on and it wasn't real. Right? It wasn't focused. It wasn't real. And so Alan Watts says, a person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts. He loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions. So what's happening is our brain, from the time we're able to start speaking till now, our brain is thinking about thoughts and it's thinking about words and it's living in a world of illusions that is not right. A world of illusions that's not really helpful for us. And so what happens is we have this ulterior world in our brain of what we think the world is like versus what the world's really like. And it starts to make us kind of crazy because we're believing it so much that our life is based on it. We're believing it so much that reality can't even be there. I remember going to therapy and my biggest fear was that I couldn't trust myself. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't trust myself. What if I flip out? What if I go crazy, right? And I didn't realize that lack of trusting yourself is just a realization that you're a human being, right? Now, if you're worried about trusting yourself and doing some harm to yourself, obviously go get help. If you're worried about drinking, obviously go to the doctor. But we got to look at this stuff and say, well, how's it happening, right? And how are we losing touch with it? And what is reality? What is real? Well, reality is not drinking. Reality is not dealing with all these things, not being prone to look at these things through the lens that we've been looking at them. Okay? So, very, very important. Now, let's take a look at some of these terms and how they help you, and then we'll do some Q&A, and you guys could tell me what's going on in your mind and how we can help you stop drinking and things like that. First of all, we have the word state. All right, the word state is a state that you are in. What is the current state you're in? Maybe you're in a current state of listening to Marcus talk and you're like, okay, well, some of this makes sense. Some of it doesn't make sense. But right now I'm in a state. When you're driving to work, you're in a state. You're in the state of driving. When you're in a heated argument, you're in a state. When you're going to drink, you're in a state of alcoholism and state of intoxication. And what happens is when you drink, the same kind of thing happens, right? This is why people do crazy shit when they drink, because what happens is it takes this conscious mind, your thoughts, your reality, what you visualize things, your processing, and it throws it out the window. And you start to rely on just the things that are for survival. You start to rely just on the things that are base ego driven. And as Freud said, there was some pretty whacked out shit that Freud said, but at any rate, right? He was like, hey, what are the main desires? There's a desire for sex, a desire for money, a desire to get ahead, a desire to win an argument, and all these desires. And what happens is when you drink, it puts you in this hypnotic state of, boom, I'm just going to be living on the subconscious mind and the subconscious desires rather than actually looking at this stuff rationally. Now, while that is an extreme state, right? We all know that state if we've drank. How many of you guys have been in that state, type drunken state? Well, that's an extreme example. The same thing's happening in every day because up until now, I never really thought that I could live on purpose. Up until now, I was a victim of my thoughts, and I gave them meaning and distorted and deleted and generalizing to fix that narrative that was going on in my brain saying, the world's against you. You need to protect yourself. You need to deal with this, right? And that is the current state you're in. Now, the cool thing is that you could consciously change your state, which brings us to the next word, which is consciousness. What is consciousness? Well, consciousness is something that's interesting. It is basically awareness. What are you aware of? And one of the things I learned early in recovery is that the mind is like a lens and you get what you focus on. The mind is like a lens and you get what you focus on. Now, where I thought my mind was a victim to the outside stimulus, that's not exactly true. Right? My mind is not a victim to what comes at me. My mind is only going where I focus it and where I point it. Right? And if I come here and I'm like, okay, well, today I'm sitting normal and someone yanks me and says, we got to go to church or whatever, and I go to church, now my thoughts are going to be directed by church and I'm going to think about these things in the past and it's going to go to that type of thing, right? Much like the way that the RAM worked in the computer, it's going to go to the old memories and look at the old stuff based on that. Now, your consciousness can be something that you can direct, all right? A lot of people think that they are victims of cravings of alcoholism. You are not a victim of cravings of alcoholism. You just have cravings of alcoholism. And why do you have those cravings? Because time and time again, you went through and you told your brain and you said, hey, brain, check it out. When you get alcohol, you feel better. You're going to feel better. And what happened is it fired all these anchors. And it said, hey, remember that time your girlfriend broke up with you and you drank? Shit, that felt good, man. Remember that time you went to that work gathering and you felt inferior to everyone and you drank and you felt better, right? Remember that? Hey, remember that time that you got in a fight with your spouse and you drank and you were like, hey, fuck this, I don't give a shit. And maybe you went through and you're like, hey, man, remember that time that I felt sick? I used to be a big sick drinker. When I had a cold, I would drink and I felt better, right? Remember that time. And what happened is thousands of times you programmed your brain and you said the meaning of alcohol, well, we got to put meaning up there. The meaning of alcohol is that it makes me feel good. And so what happened is this stuff got stored in your random access memory. And it's like, hey, check this out. In the random access memory, right, that part that's brought up all the time, that's always at the forefront of your mind, though may not be in thoughts, you sit there and you're like, hey, wait a minute, alcohol is a solution. And in your subconscious mind, in your random access memory, the brain said, hey, alcohol, good. Alcohol, feel better. And that happened thousands of times and it etched its own little spot in your random access memory. And every time you feel something, you get a craving. And it's almost as if by magic. Because you could be sitting there going through the day and you're like, holy shit, I now taste it. I now smell it. I now feel it. Much like me years ago, before I got sober, I wasn't allowed to have alcohol in the house. That was our rule at the time, and the rule didn't fucking work because no rules work except for I'm not going to drink anymore. It's the only rule that really works for someone who struggles with alcoholism. And so there I was, and I go to the restaurant, and I'm shaking like a leaf. I'm anxious. I feel like shit. I want to run away from the world. And the lady comes around the corner with my favorite drink, and all of a sudden, I start to feel calm and I start to feel better, even though I hadn't taken a sip yet. Why did that happen? That happened because my brain was producing the feeling in my body of euphoria, which is the euphoric recall that we have in alcoholism. It's like we recall all the good. When we think of alcoholism, we think of this guy who's partying. He's got his freaking party hat. He's got whatever the hell that is, right? And he's like, yes, alcohol is good. Now, for some reason, we don't really think of the bad except for right after. Right? You think about the bad on a hangover day, and your consciousness is pointed at the bad. But after that, the power of drinking, the power of thinking about drinking is more powerful than the worry of a hangover. And so our consciousness is now being extremely aware of alcoholism to the point where, much like anxiety, it is now producing physical senses in our body in the form of sight, right? When I got out of rehab, I saw alcohol places everywhere. Right? They were everywhere. Like I was like, holy shit, did they just open 5,000 times more bars now that I got out of rehab? No, they were always there. My brain just started to tune into them, right? So we got to look at that, and we got to look at our consciousness and say, how do we change this? How do we focus? And the way you change it is deliberately by changing your behavior. What is your behavior? Your behavior is, what do you do? What are you going to do when you have a craving? What are you going to do when your brain says alcohol's the solution? Because here's what's going to happen. You're going to start to make new anchors. Anchors that say, well, shit, man, I made it through that without alcohol. It's actually a little bit better. Oh, hey, I didn't need alcohol for that. And your consciousness is going to start to change around the cravings and around the alcoholism. Next definition we have is the word beliefs. What are your beliefs that you believe about the world? Is everything against you? Is everything for you? Are you supposed to go get what you need and get ahead in life? Are you a loser if you don't have the new car? Are you a loser if you lose your job? Are you a loser because you're an alcoholic? What are the beliefs that you have? And I want you to challenge them and say those beliefs are all bullshit ideas that were founded on no truth at all. All right? The fact of the matter is I'm an alcoholic because that's what alcohol does to me. That's the fact. All right, now I could put all kinds of meaning, and I could distort, and I could delete, and I could generalize everything I hear, or I could just be like, that is what it is. My new belief is that, yeah, so what? I don't drink. Big deal. The next term we want to look at is brainwashing, right? Brainwashing is all this stuff that happens involuntarily. All right, now a lot of you guys might think of like the old KGB days when brainwashing happened and they sat you in front of a TV for 10 years and didn't feed you and whatever. Now, brainwashing happens, and, it could be cultural brainwashing. Like the fact that, you feel something when you hear the Pledge of Allegiance, right? You weren't born with that. You weren't born to feel a certain thing when you saw a flag or, you went to church or you had this or had that. That was all cultural brainwashing. You weren't even born to think that having no money meant bad, or having lots of money meant good, or having a pretty wife was better than having an ugly wife, or whatever it is that society taught you. And by the way, the meaning of ugly and not ugly is completely cultural conditioning and society brainwashing. People are just people, and we're all just people. That's all there is to it. What's happening is our brain is going through and it's getting stuff through the filter of what we believe, what we've been taught, what we've been told. And a lot of this shit happened by brainwashing, which affected our consciousness, which made a life that we had to drink ourselves away from because we couldn't find a better way. And what I'm teaching you today is how to find a better way. You no longer need to be chained to desires to drink alcohol or the need to drink alcohol. You can be free from it if you start to listen and start to do something different. The next thing is frame. Now, frame is a very important one, because a frame is the way that you look at a certain situation. What happens in life is we have a memory, right? We have a memory, and maybe it's something you were abused as a kid. And we put that in a frame. And the frame says, this is what this means. Okay? And we look at it different. Much like two people can look at it the same way. My brother and I look at our parents' divorce the same way. I really don't give a shit that they divorced. It didn't mean all that different. It's like, whatever, neither here nor there. To him, he had a hard time with it. Why? Because he put it in a different frame. He gave it a different meaning, and he said, this is what this means. Okay? Just a different frame. Now, you can change your frames, and you can rewire your frames, and you can even change memories. There were studies shown where in the old days, you would go to a hypnotist, they'd call up memories, and that would be used in court. And it'd be like, wow, okay, let's use this memory in court. This guy was abused. But later on, they found out that those memories were actually fabricated. Some of the therapists inadvertently fabricated and formed new memories that didn't even exist. Now, you guys know the power of memory because when you're a drunk, you know that memory isn't always as reliable as it can be. right? You have to rely on other people to put together the pieces of your life and say, what the hell did I do last night? And so we got to look at that and say, well, memories can change. The frame can change. Life can change. Your thought processes can change. Your cravings can change. Your desire to drink can change. Next definition we have is mental maps. Now, a mental map is a map of what goes on in your brain to get a certain result. If I go work out, what happens is it gives me a good feeling, which it turns into this, which makes me look in the mirror, and I like the way I look, and all these things. Okay, now there's also mental maps for depression. Maybe your brain is prone to depression, or prone to sadness, or prone to alcoholism, or prone to happiness or excitement, right? And what we could do is we could look at the mental maps of someone who's been sober. And you could say, well, what is it that they do? What does it look like? So Marcus is sober. He's had a lot of shit happen lately. And usually like 5.5 years ago, he'd be at the bar like 5 times a day, right? So why is it different now? Well, what happened was the mental map changed. Now, instead of saying, oh, well, I went to church, I should feel this, okay, generalize meaning distort, I say, well, I went to church and obviously I'm going to feel that way, whatever, that just happens. So my mental map changed, my frames changed, and the way that I viewed things changed in a way that started to change the way I felt and started to change the way that I behave. Okay, everyone following so far? Type behavior if you guys are following. Okay, and the mental map you could look at. Go to a sober person and be like, how do you stay sober? What do you do when you're sad? What do you do when you feel like you're going to relapse? What do you do when you have a craving? And follow the mental map and look at it and find one that seems to work for you and that you can focus on. The next thing we have is metaphor and stories. Metaphor and stories I will put also with transderivational search, because metaphor and stories really drive what's going on in our life. And we go through life as if we have these backpacks on with stories that we tell ourselves about what happened. Little Marcus got bullied. Little Marcus was bullied at home and bullied at school, and everything was bad for little Marcus, and we should feel bad for him. Right? That's a metaphor and a story. Now, transderivational search happens when I hear that story told by or about someone else. Right? What happens is I can't help it but think about that. Like when I told you the thought about, hey, we all know memory. We all know that memory is faulty. We all know that memory can be not reliable. You might have thought about a time that maybe your memory wasn't spotty. How many of you guys did that? Right, let's get everyone to answer here. How many of you guys thought of a time when your memory got fucked up by drinking? Put your answers in the box. I want to see if we're all on the same page here. And let's see what's going on, because I want you guys to look at that, and I want you guys to see this in action so you know how transderivational search works. Okay? And what happens with transderivational search is your consciousness is directed to that specific point. And now you're thinking about it, right? Very, very important, okay? A lot of people say every time, but like right now. Okay, so next we have modalities. Modalities are the ways that these things happen, the different modalities that we think in, the different modalities that input comes in. The next thing we have is pre-framing, which is how we pre-frame an idea. This is something where there's a Bible verse years ago that I used to study back when I read the Bible. And it said that, you know, a fool judges a matter before hearing it. And that's kind of interesting. And that's what happens in our mind all the time is we're pre-framing things. That guy has a lot of money, therefore he's a dick. This guy has that, therefore he's this. That girl is too pretty, she won't like me. And what we're doing is we're pre-framing everything. The boss is mad, I'm probably going to get fired. And what happens is we're living in this internal world of dialogue and talking to ourselves and all this junk, and we're not living in reality, right? Very important. The next one is presuppositions, which is where we're presupposing what's going to happen. We're presupposing how life's going to be. We're presupposing what to expect, and expectations will keep you drunk. Right? If we expect things and it doesn't meet up to our expectations, you're probably going to have to go into the bar because, you know, your expectations are not always going to be met. The next thing is the structure, right? We got to look at the structure of how our mind works. This is the difference between working of mind and content of mind. A lot of times in life, we get caught up in the content of our mind, right? What is the content of our mind? Okay? That would be like the stuff we're thinking of, the things that we're consciousness about. Now, on the other hand, we have what's called working of mind, right? What's the working of the mind? Well, the working is the way your mind works, right? If your mind works addictively, you're going to have addictive thoughts. If your mind works depressively, you're going to think depressive things. If your mind is overactive, you're going to think overactive, right? That's the structure of your mind. And when we look at that structure, we're like, well, wait a minute. Now I don't need to get caught up in the content anymore because I know that whatever content I feed this machine called my brain, it's going to think the same way about it, right? If it's something happy, my depressive mind's going to find something sad about it, right? It's like the quote by Alan Watts that says, I think it was like a sad person can always, or a worrying type of person can always find something to worry about because they're the worrying type. That's what they're going to do. They're always going to worry, right? To a normal person or someone who doesn't worry, they'll be like, hey, I won the lotto. That's great. To a worry person, they'll be like, man, shit, I got taxes. What if I lose all the money? What if all the people come and ask me for money? What if I can't deal with this, right? And that's what's going to happen because of the structure of your thoughts. And then, of course, we have the unconscious, which we went through, which is behind the scenes kind of directing what's going on. And now the cool thing about this is we don't have to be a victim to our thoughts. We don't have to be a victim to it because we don't have to be the thinker, right? Who is this thinker in my brain? Who is it that built all these things? And why is this the structure that I'm living my life by? Why do these things have to mean these things? And the answer is that they don't. The answer is that we don't have to be chained to them anymore. We don't have to focus on them anymore. We don't have to give meaning to cravings saying, oh, well, I must not be a good little alcoholic because I have cravings. I must not be good because of this. I must be bad because of that. Or these should go away. Instead of just saying, of course I have cravings. I put all these anchors in my brain. That's what's going to happen. Of course I'm afraid or anxious or scared because I put these anchors in. And whether it was consciously or subconsciously, the fact of the matter is the anchors are there now. And the anchors affect the way that we think, not the content. So the content doesn't matter, but we go through life and we look at this content and we say, this is about my car that broke, or this is about my job, or this is about my marriage. And the fact of the matter is, it's not. It's about the way that you think. And the fact of the matter is consciously, you could direct your consciousness right now and say, right now I'm okay. There's not a war going on outside my house. I've got food. I think I'm going to be okay, and I think I don't have to drink anymore. And once we understand that the mind works this way, and we start to forgive ourselves for all the things that we put in our life, and we start to forgive ourselves for, hey, this is the way that I built a protection, and we start to realize I don't need that anymore. Much like a kid who maybe got afraid every time a basketball bounced because, someone threw a basketball at his face when he was a kid. And now he's afraid. And he says, I don't need that anymore because no one's throwing basketballs at me anymore. And life's not throwing arrows at me anymore. And I don't need to define everything that happens as life throwing arrows my way. And I certainly don't need to drink over it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little overview of how the mind works. Let's take some Q&A. A lot of people are asking for good books on NLP. I will try to find some for you and make a list. I'll put that list at talksober.com. Also, if you do want to support the channel and the work we're doing here, go to talksober.com, click on support the channel. And for less than the price of a beer a day, you could help out what we're doing. You can get MP3s of all of our trainings. You can get copies of our notes, all kinds of things to get and help you stay sober. And you'll feel good knowing that, hey, I'm helping other people. So let's take some Q&A here and dive in. And also, let me know what you thought on a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being, yes, I love this content, or 1 being, Marcus, this didn't help me at all. Type it in the box and let us know. All right. And if your memory's screwed up, don't worry about it. That's just what happens. Such is life, right? And we just rely on what we can rely on, and we stop getting hung up on things that we get hung up on, and we start to live on purpose and say, hey, you know what? This isn't going to be as bad as I thought it'd be. It's not going to be as bad as I thought it's going to be. Cool. All right, so let's take some questions. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. Okay, and I'll get you guys a good list of books. Hopefully today I'll put that up and get you guys squared away. All right. Any questions? Any concerns or any sober birthdays? Right? How many of you guys have a sober birthday today? Or, maybe you're like, I've been sober 20 days or whatever. Type it in box. Donna says, this was excellently presented information. Any possibilities of obtaining audiobook on NLP hypnosis to fall asleep by? Yes. I'll put those on talksober.com later today, so hop over to talksober.com, help support the channel, and I'll get you a copy of some books that you could watch, some talks you can listen to, audios and things like that. And my personal idea, I don't think NLP is the way to go for a severe alcohol addiction because I think it's too strong. So I'm not under the disguise that, hey, if you listen to, a talk, it's going to make you sober. Right? No, it's not what's going to happen. What's going to keep you sober is your behavior. Right? And the cool thing about behavior is if you change your behavior, your mind's going to follow. Right? It's kind of like it's hard to be anxious while working out. If you're actually physically working out, it's very difficult to be anxious because you're moving your body and your brain's going to follow. Okay, Kelly says 14 days sober. Congrats on that, Kelly. Good. I don't know if I've ever seen you here before, so welcome. If you guys are new, type new in the box. You still have tobacco addiction. Would you say you have an addictive personality? Probably, yeah. I like cigars, as much as my family doesn't like them, I do like them. It gives me something to do. Kelly, good to have you here. Glad you're new. Check out our other talks and check out talksober.com. Got a lot of resources to help you guys get and stay sober. Also, if you guys are new to sobriety, go see a doctor. If you've been drinking for a long time, it's always best to go see a doctor for detox because it can be deadly. Gray Ghost, do you think subliminal messages work? I think to some extent they do. I don't think they're as powerful as most people think. And I think, all messages are kind of subliminal. Like everything you hear and everything you see is subliminal messages. That's why our culture values what it values. And like when we look at it and we look at our views towards alcoholism, a lot of the subliminal messages that the alcohol companies implanted of the rite of passage in society, the girls are going to like you and guys are going to like you if you drink and everyone drinks and you should feel bad if you don't, right? A lot of that stuff is subliminally ingrained in our memory and in our brain, which makes it very difficult to stop drinking. And the key is to change our consciousness and start to fight against it and say, you know what? This is all a bunch of horse shit. This was made by an executive in a seat that wanted to sell a shit ton of booze. That's what it was. That's all it was, right? Donna, new 72 hours completed. Awesome. Good to have you here. Congrats on your 72 hours. All right, guys. Any other questions? Any other sober birthdays? Let us know, and we'll get you guys squared away. And Terry should be back next week, I believe. All right. And if you guys do want more lecture style like this training, type lecture in the box and also in the comments. And make sure if you're not subscribed that you subscribe and click the bell. That way you know when we're live and we come out with new videos and everything like that. Okay, any questions on what we went over so far? Have I heard of Craig Beck? Vaguely. I don't know much about him. I have heard about him. So yeah, I think a lot of the stuff out there isn't really geared towards hardcore alcoholism. For me, I'm 5.5 years sober, and my alcoholism was severe. In the beginning, I tried reading books, I tried listening to things, and nothing worked because I was a severe alcoholic, and it was to the point where my mind had been hijacked. So what happens is when you drink enough, these anchors and everything, they get embedded in your brain, and nothing can stop it. I mean, I was a guy who was a complete germaphobe. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't leave the house without slacks on. I mean, I work in my backyard, and you guys see how I dress to go to work in my backyard, even when I'm not doing a video. So I was a complete germaphobe, and I was the kind of guy that at the end of my alcoholism, I actually went in the trash bin to find alcohol to see if there was any left if I didn't have any. And I would take all those alcohols and make a little drink out of them, which was absolutely disgusting and absolutely against my beliefs, which shows you that this shit can get hijacked. This stuff can get hijacked before you even know it. And I think that sometimes NLP and sometimes hypnotherapy doesn't do the trick because of how far gone we are. And I was completely far gone, ready to lose everything, ready to end my own life because of the stories that I believed and the stories I told myself and the stories alcohol told me. And no amount of audiobooks, no amount of, cute little trainings and things like that could help me because I was gone. Like all I could do was think about the next drink all day, all night. And if you're that kind of alcoholic, I don't know if, fluffy books and hypnotherapy is going to work for you. Try it if you can. But if you're far gone where I was, where you're literally at the end of your rope, almost at the end of your life, get yourself some help, right? And we're actually going to work on an article on talksober.com where we talk about, hey, what do you need to do if you need absolute help? Okay, Donna, it's all stellar. Loving the variety of formats. Lecture format is very engaging. Good, glad you liked it. Wasn't sure how it'd go over, but I think it's good to know what's going on in your mind so you can understand it. The Commodore, I found bad stresses made me drink. I used to gamble and that caused me to drink. Eliminating bad stresses helps. You can never eliminate stress, just try to cut out toxic stress. Yeah, absolutely. And look at stress differently because when we talk about pre-framing, right, how are you pre-framing the stress? Right? Are you pre-framing it saying, oh man, nothing's ever going to get ahead. I'm in debt from gambling and all I ever want to do is gamble. And I got this drinking program in my life is fucked. Right? That's a pre-frame. Instead, you could say, well, life is what it is. This is where I'm at. Let's deal with it as it comes. It's not the end of the world. I used to think that my life was worth less than a couple $1 million. And that was my frame. Okay, well, if I can't make $10 million, then I'm not worth being alive. If I can't do this, it's not worth it. Right? And then I realized, hey, you know what? My life is of value no matter how much I make. My life is of value no matter what I do, even if I'm an alcoholic. The guy strung out on the street that society says is useless, who can't stop drinking and drugging and is homeless, his life is worth as much as mine. He's just in a different programming. He's in a different state. And he's in a different hypnosis that says, hey, you know what? Unlike Marcus, who could go through his fancy trash can at his fancy house for alcohol, I can't do that. I got to go on the street corner. And I got to fall asleep on this bench because every dime I have is going to go to alcohol. Right? It's the same state, just different person. And everyone is valued just the same. And we got to look at that and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm of value. Being an addict doesn't make it any different. It just makes it a different thing that I go through. Makes it a different state. And we could snap out of it. And there's another term in NLP that's called breaking the state or pattern interrupt. Because what happens is through life, we go through a pattern. Like if you're there and you're driving home and you're in one of those trances where you don't realize where you're at, you just get home and you're like, how'd I get home? I don't know. But if you were driving home and an ambulance like flew past you and almost crashed into you, you're going to snap out of that. That's a pattern interrupt, right? It's going to interrupt it. And same with drinking. You're in a pattern. I wake up, I drink. I drink throughout the day, I pass out asleep, and I wake up the next day and I drink. And that's your pattern, and you start to think these certain ways, and depression and all these things are patterns, and you can interrupt them. You could say, enough is enough. No more. I'm not going to have this anymore. I don't need this in my life anymore. I'm not going to be on autopilot anymore. And now's your chance to stand up and say, I don't have to be on autopilot. What am I going to do to change my pattern? Some people go to meetings. Some people listen to our talks. Some people go to rehab. Whatever you're going to do to interrupt it, right? And that's what intervention is about. Intervention is about going and breaking someone's pattern and saying, hey, enough's enough. Drinking is not working for you or the rest of us, so what's it going to be? Right? And that's a pattern interrupter that says, boom, hey, let's knock this shit off. Let's stop this. Right? And while listening to cute hypnosis talks and things like that can help some, I think for a lot of us, we need a different pattern interrupt that says, I don't need to live this way anymore. I don't have to fall prey to alcoholism and my old way of thinking. All right, any other questions? Let us know. Also, if you are not yet in our Facebook group, I will put a link to our Facebook group in the chat box below, if I can find it. There it is. All right, so put the link to the chat box in, or the link in the chat box to the Facebook group, and you can join us there. We talk all about sobriety stuff and everything like that. All right, guys, any other questions, let us know. We got about 5 minutes for questions. Donna, I empathize with the Commodore's comment. I believe I began to drink to disinhibit me around food after a long restrictive eating disorder. Yeah, a lot of people come and talk about eating disorders and alcoholism. I had an eating disorder when I was a kid. It wasn't like a super diagnosed one, but I would starve myself. And, you know, alcohol was good because it's like, hey, here's a bunch of calories. But it wasn't good because it wasn't the right kind of calories. And guess what? It made me drunk and miserable. But we got to look at that too. But yeah, you know, we got to look at it and look at what are we going to do instead of drink? What are we going to do? Because actions keep you sober. How do I feel about meditation? I like meditation. I don't know if I do it right. But, you know, I could tell you now, 6 years, almost 6 years, or 5.5 years sober, I can calm my mind a lot easier. Right? So I do like meditation. For meditation, I like to listen to like Ram Dass and stuff like that. Alan Watts. Could you possibly talk about the link between eating disorders and alcohol? Well, I think they're similar in the sense that it hijacks our reward system and it hijacks the way we feel. The difference between alcoholism is alcohol is chemically changing you, which I guess debatably food would too. Because, you know, if you're starving, you know, or eating all the time, it does change the way you feel. But alcohol actually makes you drunk, which changes a lot of things. But I think the link is a lot of people struggle with them because they don't know a different way to cope. Right? Some people cope through food or lack of food or alcohol or drugs. And what happens is we're having these coping mechanisms. And what's funny, not really funny, it's actually kind of sad, is that the coping is all about the things that were built up in our mind, right? It's all about these beliefs. It's all about the meaning, the distortion, the deleting, the generalizing. It's all about the beliefs of what we have. And those aren't real. Those are all just fabricated based on our life. And while it's true that some people might have been hurt, myself included, and some people have trauma, we don't need to be defined by it anymore. And a lot of people talk about like exposure therapy, where you expose yourself to the stimuli. So, you know, for me, it would be like going to church or whatever. And you go to church and your anxiety drops and you keep going and you keep going and eventually you'll be better. But I find the better way to do it is just to change the frame altogether and say this no longer means it anymore. And I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to deal. And we have to realize that up until now, you haven't really lived on purpose, and now I can decide to live on purpose. And that's why people find, you know, value in the STEPS program, because now it's like, hey, we're going to go through these steps, we're going to live on purpose. And whether you do it through steps or whatever, you know, to each his own, but I think it can really help you. Commodore says, I would drink to numb out the stress. I think that may apply to all things for people who drink like that. Yeah, I drank to numb out stress. I drank to shut off my mind because I used to think I was a victim of my thoughts, which is silly because, no, I'm not a victim of my thoughts. Thoughts just happen. They're chemical impulses in the brain. If I watch TV, I'm going to start to think about whatever I watch. If I watch murder mysteries, I'm going to start to think there's murderers on every corner. If I watch the news, I'm going to start to think everything's freaking political. And so we look at this and we're like, these things affect our thinking, and these thoughts are not my own. These thoughts aren't my own because I didn't invent the English language, so how the hell could they be my own? Right? They're just something that was put on me, and I don't need to deal with it. I could just go through and be okay and be like, hey, I don't need to worry anymore. It's going to be all right. And I think acceptance is key. That's why accepting yourself as an alcoholic's key, because now it's like, I'm an alcoholic. I can't drink anymore. There we go. Well, what if I just want one? No, drinking's off the table. I'm done. Right? And that changes everything, because now it's no longer an option. Drinking has to not be an option. And if you sit there and you're like, well, I can't decide whether to not drink for the rest of my life, start with a year. Don't drink for a year. After a year, you could reevaluate. This is your life. You're not stuck into anything. You can do whatever the hell you want. You can go get drunk today if you want, right? It's probably not the best idea, but hey, you're an adult. You can do what you want. And we got to look at this and say, I'm not chained to one thing. I could just be sober, right? And realize that all the combat that's in your mind that says, oh, well, you can't decide not to drink the rest of your life, that's all conditioning. That's all pre-framing. That's all shit society put on you, and it doesn't matter, right? You're running a program. And in life, here's the deal. Every state, every trance, everything we're in is running a program. It's just running automatic. Boom, I push a button. And that's a funny thing. Like even with love, right? You fall in love with someone because they push all the right buttons. It's automatic. It's like a moth to a flame. You can't fucking help it. And the same thing happens. Some guy cuts you off in traffic and gives you the middle finger, and you get anxious and you get angry. It's running a program. That guy doesn't matter. He can do whatever the hell he wants with his middle finger. It doesn't matter to me. He's way up there. But you're still sitting there thinking about him. Why? Because you're running a program saying, I'm more important than that. I need to be mad at that. Justice needs to happen. And don't get me wrong, justice does need to happen, but you don't need to run a program for every little thing that happens. Obviously, if something bad happens, go seek justice. Just like us alcoholics, if you do something bad, fess up to it. Own up to it. Hey, you know what? I got drunk and I kicked a window in or whatever, right? Don't do that, by the way. Don't do anything while drinking except sit in a seat that's padded because who the hell knows what's going to happen, right? But you don't have to run those programs anymore. You don't have to live by that anymore. All right, any last minute questions? We'll take one more before we call it a day, and then we'll see you next week at 11. Donna says, for me, it was fear of eating certain foods and to avoid difficulty in expressing emotions in personal relationship. The numbing factor. I understand to fake smiley and cheery persona, right? And you don't have to be fake anymore. Just be real. Hey, today I'm having a shitty day. Big deal, right? And the minute you let go of what you think you are and who you want to be is the minute you don't have to wear that fake suit anymore. Right? I don't need to wear the fake suit. I don't need to deal with this. I know says, when I get the craving to drink, I try to postpone moment by moment. Then finally I cannot withstand my craving and I give in. The best thing to do is realize that a craving only really lasts about 15 minutes if you don't fight it. And realize that, hey, I could have a craving and I don't need to do anything. Right? It's obsession compulsion. You obsess about the drink and you have the compulsion to drink to shut off the obsession, which probably has nothing to do with the drink, but now it's becoming about the drink because now you're chemically altered and now things are all fucked up. And it's like, I don't need to do that anymore. Right? For 5.5 years, I've had cravings off and on, and I don't need to drink. Neither do you. Neither do you. All right, guys. Go to TalkSober.com, support the channel. Help us with what we're doing here, and let's stay sober. Thanks again. Put your comments below. Give us a thumbs up and a like, and subscribe, and check us out on TalkSober.com. Join our Facebook group. Let's have fun. Let's be sober. See you next week.